Hello, everyone. Welcome to Cinema Mancuso, and this is Notes on the News. I'm Peter Mancuso, and this is the show where I break down the biggest stories in film, media, and entertainment and give you my thoughts. If you joined us live, super happy to have you. If you have any questions or comments about any of the topics I'm going to be covering, feel free to drop them in the live chat. I have it pulled up here. I'll try my best to kind of keep an eye on it, see if we can get kind of a conversation started. If you haven't already, please like this live stream. It really helps with engagement and the algorithm and other people finding the channel. And if you have stumbled upon this channel, if you haven't already, subscribe, because we're trying to grow this community. We're super happy to have you. We want to keep you here. We want to hold you as long as possible. If you're watching this after the fact, I'm still super happy to have you. By the time you're watching this, there should be time codes down in the description so you can kind of jump around at your leisure. We stream this show every Tuesday at 6 p.m. Eastern Time. And same deal as before. If you haven't already, please like and do not forget to subscribe. Okay, let's take a look at the box office from this past week. Total domestic box office was around 183 million, which was about a 62% drop from where we were. Which, at first glance, you might go, but when you take a closer look at it, this makes a lot of sense considering not only was last week the week of the week prior to the week we're looking at. That was the week of Thanksgiving. So not only is that just a time where people go to the movies more often, but also a lot of people had Thursday, if not also Friday and the Wednesday before off, so you had more opportunities to go to the movies. So this is not so much an indictment of this week, but more so a reflection of just how big the Thanksgiving week was. Nothing huge opening this week, but we do have a couple, actually more than a couple. Half of the top 10 are opening this week. Though one is kind of with an asterisk opening. But they're all smaller, right? So the biggest new movie opening at number 5, Pushpa the Rule Part 2. This is like a Bollywood film. I know very little about it. All I know is that it just barely fell below the projection. So it was projected to make around 5 to 8 million with a 7 million target. So, not particularly great, but again, I've said this a million times about Bollywood films that opening in the United States, they're never going to do huge numbers. They're already making money in their domestic market, and then they'll make money digitally. So any money that it can make at the American box office is just kind of an extra, in my opinion, on top of just maybe even building awareness for the brand. Because the more Bollywood movies in the domestic box office, in domestic theaters, even if you're not going, the fact you're seeing so many posters maybe around your theater, or you see the screening. So a lot of theaters, like I know some Regal theaters and AMC, like they'll have like a digital screen, like a digital poster of whatever the movie that's playing in that theater is, and they'll say like, the 320 showing of Moana 2. If you're walking around the theater and seeing all of these movies, it might make you want to maybe one day check one of them out, right? So I think this is fine, even though it kind of fell below those projections. So far, domestically, it's made about a little over 9 million, but worldwide, it's made like almost 90 million, right? Off of around a roughly $53 million budget. So it's crossed that initial threshold, but ideally we can get a little bit north of 100 million worldwide. I did have to convert these numbers from rupee. Not even rupee, but crore. So if you go on Wikipedia and look at this movie's budget and box office, it'll say like 750 crore, C-R-O-R-E. And I was like, what the hell is that? And apparently that's like a shorthand because rupees are super invaluable. So a crore is a unit of 10 million rupees. So if it says 750 crore, that means it's 7 billion-ish rupees, right? So then you do the conversion, and it's 88 US dollars. Also opening, quote unquote, again, this is the asterisk, is Interstellar. Of course, this is not a new movie. This is a 10-year-old movie, of course, by Christopher Nolan. One of his kind of underrated ones. Obviously, it has its huge fans, of which I am one, full disclosure. But it's definitely one of like in terms of like mass popularity and critical consensus, it's definitely like maybe in a B tier, not a beer tier, a B tier. But this opened at number 6. They're re-releasing it. Big part of it is in IMAX. Made about 4.5 million in this opening weekend. Not sure how long this run is going to go. But again, it's similar, like with the Bollywood film, anything on top of it is extra cash, right? For, I think it's Warner Brothers, right? I think it's Warner Brothers, right? Because the whole thing is that Christopher Nolan was with Warner Brothers for like everything until Oppenheimer. Oh, interesting. So Warner Brothers was one of the production companies, but in the United States it was distributed by Paramount. That sounded right, because I feel like I've seen the Paramount logo at the beginning of that movie. So this brings its domestic total, if you're counting its original runs. It brings its domestic total to 193 million, and its worldwide total to 737-ish million, off of a $165 million budget. So again, it's already been profitable. So any little chunk of change that can get distributed out to all the royalty holders, the better. Also opening a concert film. So this is really weird, actually, before I talk about this. So, like, this whole week of the box office, I think, shows the state of the box office, where you have, like, the first 4 movies, especially like the first 2 or 3, are, like, really, really big movies. Not only do they cost more, but they're, like, actual movies made by domestic production companies and studios, made for domestic audiences, bringing in bigger amounts of money. You have, like, it's very front loaded, and then everything else is kind of fighting over the scraps, right? Because if you look here, I'm not just looking at the weekend gross. You have around 74 million, then 59, 21. So it goes from 59 to 21, 21 to 9 or 10, and then we keep like halving it. So then number 5, we talked about Pushpa, is like half of what number 4 made, right? So you have all these weird examples in the top 10, just because those big 3 movies, and to an extent maybe the 4th one, is just sucking the oxygen out of the room. Because the fact that at number 7 we have For King and Country, A Drummer Boy Christmas Live, the fact that it's in the top 10 is crazy. So this is, I looked up very quickly, it's a Christian band. I wouldn't say quite Christian rock, but it's kind of like Christian anthem music, right? I don't know how else to describe it. When you hear it, you kind of know what I'm talking about. I guess this is like a concert film for them, themed obviously around Christmas music. Brought in a little under 3 million. That's its entire domestic and worldwide total right now. But again, like I said, the fact this is even in the top 10, is interesting. Not necessarily surprising, yes, but I think the main adjective I want to use is interesting. Also in the top 10, number 9, we have Solo Leveling Reawakening. This is Solo. I had to look into this. What are the kids into these days? And this is an anime, and from my understanding, this film is essentially the first 2 episodes of like whatever the newest season is, kind of packaged together and released in theaters. I guess same thing like the Bollywood situation. It's really just about any extra money. It's almost more like a promotional piece than anything. It brought in a little under 2.5 million, which was good because it was projected to make around 1 to 3 with a 2 target. So this was above the target. So I would say it was a decent success, but I don't know how much this cost, right? That's another big thing. And I always hate that when you can see on this chart when I'm not able to put the budget and the percent return, because I feel like that's super important. But at the same time, the movies that we aren't able to get that info for, probably by coincidence, are also the movies where it's really not going to make that big of a difference if it was made for 1 million or 2 million. They're not making a lot of money, right? But what we do know the budget for, and this is a little disappointing, is for number 10, Y2K. This is kind of like an alt history comedy about what if Y2K like actually happened, right? So on the switch from December 31st, 1999 to January 1st, 2000. What if in fact all the computers did explode or malfunction and all the nukes got launched and all the planes dropped out of the air? Starring Rachel Zegler and the kid from It, and then the kid from Hunt for the Wilder People. It's kind of like meh reviews. And I feel like I saw barely any advertising for this, if at all. I mean, in fact, I think the only advertising I saw for this is when the trailer first released, like months and months ago. And that was just because I like Rachel Zegler. And it's like an interesting idea for a film. So This fell below the projections. It was projected to make around 3 to 8 with a 6 million target, and only made a little over 2 million. So definitely disappointing, especially if you then factor in the budget. It was made for about 15 million. So again, this is what we're talking about. 15 million in the grand scheme of things is not a lot of money. But the issue is that it didn't really make a lot of money. So right now it is very, very much in the red. And I don't see this playing really well overseas. And as we can see, it's not currently playing overseas. But even if it's like, sometimes movies open really poorly and it's like, oh, but wait till it opens in China, right? I don't see that happening here. On top of not getting very good reviews, I think this is basically a dead in the water. Continuing to the second week, we have Moana 2, right? The phenomenon, the surprise phenomenon, or at least surprise to me, maybe because I'm a dummy. It held its first place spot now in its second frame, brought in just a little under 74 million. So, it was a 67% drop, which is not good. In any other week, I would be raising the alarms. But again, considering that the entire weekend had a drop of like 62%, it's not that surprising, especially considering that this opened the week of Thanksgiving. So it would make sense that moving into like a regular week, it would have a big drop, right? This brings it domestically to almost 300 million though, which is impressive after just 2 weeks, and almost 600 million worldwide off of a $150 million budget. So this has already been very profitable. I think even just last week, did it? Yeah, by last week it was already profitable. So, the question's going to be, and I asked this last week, and I'm not sure if we're going to really be able to get an answer from this week since everything's going to have a big drop. I mean, if you look at all of the movies we have last week percent changes for, they're all, like the lowest one is at 57%, right? So the question will be in the next week, will this hold? Because again, like I talked about, the original Moana was not this huge mammoth success by any means. It was very successful. But what made it really a cultural phenomenon was the post-theatrical life of the film. Particularly of, kids, especially, because that came out 2016? Wow, that's a while ago. I like remember. 2016? I was like in college, yeah. Okay. It didn't have this huge opening, but not too long after that opened, like a couple of years later with Disney Plus, the kids are just able to play this thing on loop over and over. And even probably before that, people had rented it, or it was on Netflix, or they had the DVD or the Blu-ray or whatever. So that's what made it a phenomenon, was kids just watching it over and over and over and over, and especially streaming the music over and over and over. And that original movie was received fairly well. This has not been received well, really, at all. So the fact that it opened as big as it did was a big surprise to me. And I'm curious to see how well it holds over the next couple of weeks as we move into the Christmas season. Again, there's not too many big movies to compete, or at least that can compete at this level, I think. So the question I guess I'm trying to ask in so many words is this going to be up there in like the top grossing movies of the year? I guess it already is. Actually, let's do a little live looking. I'm going to go to Box Office Mojo, looking at domestic box office. I'm going to look at 2024. Wow, Moana's already number 5 for the whole year, for at least domestically. That's crazy. So I guess the question is, will this reach to the top 3? Because right now it's Inside Out 2 at first place, and then Deadpool Wolverine at second. I'm wondering if Disney's really holding out, because right now Despicable Me 4 is at number 3, and it has like 361 million, and Moana has roughly 300 million. So I guess the question is, can it make another 60 million? Right? Can they get to a place where Disney has the top 3 movies of the year domestically, which would be really important for them since they used to have such dominance, especially like right up to COVID. They used to have so much dominance over the box office. Where I think in 2019 they had $7 billion movies and one that made almost $3 billion. So like the top 10 was almost all Disney movies. So I'm sure Disney is hoping that they can return to something like that. But also still holding out is Wicked, right? So holding its second place spot in its third week, brought in a little under 59 million. Again, also kind of a biggest drop at 61%, but again, that's not surprising. And it's actually, though, made more than Moana domestically, right? That extra week has helped, right? Domestically, it's made about 322 million. I think that makes it the number 4 of the domestic yearly totals. It's had really good legs, right? So if you look at that domestic multiple, it's almost at 3. So that means that, the opening is only about a third of the total, which is good. You don't want to see something where it opens really big, and then just filters out. So the opening is a bigger portion of the opening. The total domestic box office. So domestically, what did I say? 322. Worldwide, more than 450 million. Again, off of a similar $150 million budget. So this has been very, very successful. I think this movie's incredible. I've not seen Moana 2, but Wicked is incredible. So it couldn't happen to a better film, and I really hope that it can keep this going. Though again, since Moana 2 made 73-ish million this week, I should say, I think it's, what did I say? In order to get to number 3, it would have to make about 60. Well, if it drops just 50%, it's already close to that. So, we'll just have to see. Also still holding out is Gladiator 2, holding its third place spot in its third week. Made a little over 21 million. Also had a biggest drop of 62%. This brings its domestic total to 132 or 133 million. Worldwide, 369 million off of, a $230 million budget. So that's the thing, right? Comparing it to Wicked or Moana, that it's made less money, but it cost more. So, it still has a chance to become profitable, to cross that doubling the budget threshold. But it's becoming a little more unlikely with every week. And then also still in the top 5, holding its 4th place. So as you can see, basically 1 to 4, those spots 1 to 4 held exactly as they were last week. We have Red 1 in its 4th week, bringing in just a little under 10 million. Had the least bad percent drop, which is really interesting. But I guess that just speaks to the other movies because they were so big, they had farther to fall, right? This brings its domestic total to around 86 million. It's had decent legs over these past 4 weeks. And worldwide, it's made 165 million, right? But again, the kicker, or like the caveat, is that it cost north of $200 million. So this is still very much in the red, just by the inflated salaries of its cast. So I think I'm dubious. But again, this movie always felt like it was like a digital or like direct to streaming or direct to renting movie. So maybe it'll kind of have a second life there and kind of make back its money in the long term. And then finally, number 8, dropping from 5th to 8th place, it was the biggest victim of all these new movies opening, is The Best Christmas Pageant Ever. Now in its 5th frame, so it's been out for over a month now, still in the top 10. Made about 2.5 million, but, it's had pretty decent legs. It opened around 10 and 11 million, and right now domestically it's up to a little over 34 million. And worldwide it's also like a little closer to 35 than 34, right? This is mostly domestic. But then again, by contrast, it's made way less than Red 1, but also cost 5% of the cost, right? It was only made for $10 million. So this is kind of similar story of like a movie that feels like it could have just gone direct to streaming or direct to video, but because it was cheaper, it's having way, for every dollar spent, you're getting way more money back. And looking ahead to this upcoming weekend, I should say, we have Kraven the Hunter, the Sony's next attempt, at their Spider-Man-less Spider-Man universe, right? So it's all the villains, which is not done very well, except for like the Venom films. These have not done financially well, and really none of them have done critically well. So the projections for this are very low. I'm hoping this is good because I like Aaron Taylor Johnson, pictured here as Kraven. But I think just the whole thing is just flawed conceptually. Right now, it's tracking to make around 20 to 28 million with a 23 million target. And again, I don't know. It'll be interesting to compare this to the opening for Madam Web, which came out earlier this year, which is lampooned as like not just one of the worst superhero movies, but like one of the worst movies ever made. Which is a shame, because I think you could do something interesting with this material, but the whole concept is flawed from the jump. And then also we have the Lord of the Rings, the War of the Rohirrim. I'm sure I'm mispronouncing this. This is like an anime film that takes place in like the Lord of the Rings Middle-earth universe. I think it takes place like a couple of 100 years, or it's not part of the same era that is like the Lord of the Rings stories. It's like 100 years before or after or something. I really don't know a lot about it. But what I do know is that it's like an anime film essentially. So that's kind of cool. Something different, right? And again, kind of some of this also feels like it could have gone direct to streaming, but I appreciate that it's getting a theatrical release right now. It's not projected to make a lot of money though. It's only projected to make around 5 to 13, but I'm gonna put the target around 10 million. And it could be good. I don't know. I've heard like it's fine. But it's always interesting to see something a little bit different at the box office. All right, before we continue, I just want to give a quick plug to Cinema Q. So it's not just a YouTube channel. It started as and still is a Substack newsletter where I publish written reviews for new movies coming out. I want to give a plug here to the newest review I have up, which is for the movie Wicked. I thought this movie was incredible. Not to spoil the review, but I am really particular about movie musicals. If you know anything about me, I did a movie musical for my thesis film at NYU, which a little plug, you can find in the description down below. So I'm very particular about movie musicals, but this one scratched every itch that I, as a musical fan and a movie fan, could have scratched. It was a lot of fun, really, really impressive, and really surprising how impressive it was. So definitely go check out that review. Comment why you disagree with everything I say in the review. You can find the link in the description down below, or you can just go to your browser, type in cinemainqso.substack.com. Okay, let me grab a quick drink here. Let's talk about story number 1. So the TikTok is one step closer to being banned after federal judges unanimously upheld the law passed earlier this year. I think it was back in April. 3 judges. This was 3 judges in the U.S. Court of Appeals for the District of Columbia Circuit. And they denied, the whole basis of this particular case is that they denied TikTok's petition to overturn again, this law that was passed earlier this year. I got a quote here from the chief judge of those 3, I'm going to mispronounce this, I'm really sorry. Srinivasan, I think they're South Asian, saying, quote, Congress judged it necessary to assume that risk given the grave national security threats it perceived. And because the record reflects that Congress's decision was considered consistent with longstanding regulatory practice and devoid of an institutional aim to suppress particular messages or ideas, we are not in a position to set it aside, end quote. I got another quote here from one of those 3 judges, Judge Douglas Ginsburg, saying, quote, we emphasized from the outset that our conclusion here is fact-bound. The multi-year efforts of both political branches to investigate the national security risks posed by the TikTok platform and to consider potential remedies proposed by TikTok weigh heavily in favor of the act, meaning the law. The government has offered persuasive evidence demonstrating that the act is narrowly tailored to protect national security, end quote. And a lot of people are happy about this ruling. So I got a quote here, another quote. It's a quote palooza from Attorney General, or current Attorney General, Merrick Garland, who called the ruling, quote, an important step in blocking the Chinese government from weaponizing TikTok to collect sensitive information about millions of Americans, to covertly manipulate the content delivered to American audiences, and to undermine our national security, end quote. Basically, nothing has changed since the law was passed, and it's currently scheduled to go into effect literally the day before the inauguration, so January 19th. So the ban is looming, right? The official name for this law Protecting Americans from Foreign Adversary Controlled Applications Act. Lawmakers love to give long-winded names, though I'm surprised this isn't like an acronym for something, because usually that's what they like to do. I guess you could make an acronym out of this, but PFACA. PFACA. Yeah, that's what we're going to call it, PFACA. And again, like I said, this is a law that was originally passed earlier this year in April in both chambers with overwhelming bipartisan support. So this was not a Democrat or Republican issue. This was something that most of the parties all agreed was a concern. And the concerns here are all based in the Chinese government's influence on the parent company of TikTok, which is ByteDance, right? It's a Chinese company. They have the controlling interest in TikTok. So there's concerns that the Chinese government, basically because of the way the laws are set up in China, because it's, an authoritarian government, that they could, basically seize ByteDance and or influence it to, make, for example, a very specific example is the Chinese government could, have ByteDance, have TikTok manipulate the algorithm to push content that is, amenable to Chinese foreign policy and suppress content that is not amenable to Chinese foreign policy, right? So everyone's really is concerned, right? But this would be a huge, huge deal if this ban does end up happening, which it seems like it's more every day more and more likely that it will happen. But this is huge because there's 170 million users of this app in the United States. And not only that, but just if you just look at the history of social media, TikTok is up there. It's not just, the passing fad. It really has changed American social media, the way it works, the way that Facebook felt like a huge innovation, and the way Twitter felt like a huge innovation, and Instagram. This really every company has now tried to mimic TikTok with, the scrolling element, right? Where, you have videos kind of just fed to you rather than something like YouTube where you're like looking for them. Of course, YouTube has like a For You page that recommends stuff, but not in this way. But now YouTube has their own version called YouTube Shorts, right? So everybody, Facebook has Reels. I'm sure Twitter is gonna come up with something if they haven't already. Everyone has basically tried to copy TikTok. But when this ban was passed, I've actually done a couple videos about this early in the year where you could go check out my original contemporary response. But the concerns when the law was passed are kind of the same as they are now. There's a lot of concerns about if this is legal or ethical or any other adjective you want to apply. So one area of concern relates to free speech, right? By banning TikTok, you are limiting people's First Amendment rights, which would be unconstitutional, right? I got a quote here from the ACLU spokesperson Patrick Toomey saying, quote, "The government cannot shut down an entire communications platform unless it poses extremely serious and imminent harm, and there's no evidence of that here," end quote. And that's very true, right? And that's been a big thing, is that this whole hullabaloo is all about the hypothetical, like, what if China does this or pulls on these levers, so to speak, which I think are fair concerns, but not because China is a particularly evil country, just because they are a country. And if we had this opportunity, we would do the exact same thing, right? So I'm not trying to draw like a good versus evil comparison here, right? But I'm not sure if the argument that this is a violation of free speech holds up. Since it is a law against a platform, not the speech, right? I understand this ACLU spokesperson's argument here, but the idea that they said the government cannot shut down an entire communications platform unless, and then he goes on to explain, but you say that like it's a fact, like, can they not? Like, is that, I didn't know the law, specified for that, right? And the judges kind of responded to not that specific quote, obviously, but to this kind of concern that's been presented. And the judges, in their statement, in their majority opinion, said, quote, "The government acted solely to protect that freedom," meaning free speech, "from a foreign adversary nation and to limit that adversary's ability to gather data on on people in the United States," end quote. So I'm kind of in agreement here with the judges. I think the argument should not be that this is a violation of free speech, because I think this is very clearly not a free speech issue. Another concern that's mostly been put forth by TikTok, the company, saying, the sale is impossible because the whole terms of the deal is not to ban TikTok. It's basically, if TikTok does not sell, the American side of the business to a non-Chinese entity, then it will get banned. So theoretically, it's not a ban, but more so a regulation that will most likely not be satisfied, because, again, the way TikTok puts it is the Chinese government would never allow this, because even though ByteDance is a company, again, the government and private business are very intermingled in China. And to spin off the US portion of TikTok would be to sell off the algorithm, which is the most valuable thing, and the Chinese government would not want to do that because that's valuable property, right? But just because that they wouldn't allow it doesn't make the law unconstitutional. Like, they're kind of two separate questions. And the judges kind of respond to this concern saying, quote, TikTok would have us, meaning the judges, or I guess like the American legal system, TikTok would have us turn the takings clause into a means by which a foreign adversary nation may render unconstitutional legislation designed to counter the national security threats presented by that very nation, end quote. So basically what they're saying is, if that's true, that if we were to apply that standard, then basically any foreign government could circumvent laws that are passed for national security reasons, right? And even if the Chinese government was willing to do this, a lot of publications have noted that any company that would be big enough and have the pockets to buy TikTok probably there would be some antitrust issues, right? The companies that would want to do this would be like Google or Meta. And I believe Mark Zuckerberg tried to buy TikTok, this is pre-COVID. So it's like, who would even be the buyer for this thing? Because anyone who could afford it probably wouldn't be allowed to buy it, right? And then another concern, which I think is not legally persuasive, but at least it just makes sense intuitively. This is going to be a major blow to content creators who rely on TikTok for their income. I have a quote here from a content creator, Stephen King. No, of course not that one, spelled with a V. Stephen King saying, quote, do I feel like this would be the only possible reason that I would ever agree with Trump being in office again? If it saves my career, then hey, he's done something for me, end quote. And that kind of is a great segue to talk about the elephant in the room, right? This was passed bipartisanly, but signed by the Democratic president, Joseph Robinette Biden. But he is not going to be in office, nor will his successor be in office this winter. It will be Donald J. Trump, who is apathetic about this, right? You can tell when Trump really cares about something and when he does not. And it just does not seem like there's something he really cares about, which is an about face, because this is something that he was the first one to suggest back in 2020. He's the original one who suggested we ban this because of the Chinese influence. But of course, when it became a bipartisan issue, and notably the bipartisan elements were like the establishment parts of each of the parties, and that Biden was supporting it, of course, Trump then kind of changes his mind, which makes sense because it was more politically expedient for him in 2020 during COVID to kind of use the TikTok issue as like a anti-China posturing. Obviously, that's a big problem. The competition with China is just as big, if not more of a problem now. It's not as big of a problem for Trump anymore, right? Because back then it was more about like the social things about the pandemic. He's much more concerned about, or at least the way he puts it, he's more concerned about companies like Meta. He would argue that they're more detrimental to society, but anyone with a brain understands that the reason why he's more concerned about those is because he doesn't like Mark Zuckerberg and Facebook and Instagram for removing him following January 6th, right? And it also doesn't hurt that he has powerful friends who benefit from TikTok. and benefit from TikTok's continued presence in the United States. So, like, for example, there's an investor, Jeff Yass. Jeff Yass. He's an investor in ByteDance, and he also donated to Trump's reelection campaign, right? So he's probably gotten signals from his donor base, basically being like, kill this thing, or mitigate this, or what have you. So now he doesn't care about it. And the New York Times notes that a spokesperson for the Trump team did say back in November that there is a plan to rescue the app, but the person gave zero details about this. So this could just be kind of kicking the can down the road. So if he wanted to, could he reverse this? The thing is probably not. Not as simple as me as the president now, like me, Trump. You know, it's not as simple as Trump just saying, I reverse this, right? Since there was a law passed by Congress would have to pass a new law to repeal the original law. And though the New York Times does note, some experts think that if they're not able to repeal the law, he may just have his attorney general just refrain from enforcing the law. But then that puts a lot of companies in a weird position, because the ban could affect, part of the ban is that, app stores like Google and Apple, they can't host the app either. But if Trump says, we're not going to enforce the law, it's technically illegal, but you might not get in trouble for it. So then companies like Google and Apple need to decide, is it worth having TikTok on our app stores? Because then once he leaves and a new president decides, we are going to enforce it, then basically they've been breaking the law for 4 years. Or even if just Trump himself changes his mind, then, then now there's a period where they have been documented to be breaking the law. So is it really worth taking Trump's word on this? Probably not. Now, the law as it was passed does allow for the president to decide if the conditions for the removal of a foreign adversary's influence have been met, right? I think it's like a 3-month extension, right? So Trump may try to argue, it's been mitigated. So the app could try some restructuring to at least do something, so Trump can kind of just say, look, they did something. I think that's, like, it kind of puts a lot of discretionary power in the executive office. I think, the executive branch. But that could be one way Trump is able to kind of bypass all this. But nevertheless, looking back at this specific case, TikTok, is not planning on giving up after this court upheld the law. They probably plan to appeal all the way up to the Supreme Court. And we got a quote here from a TikTok spokesman, Michael Hughes, saying, quote, "The Supreme Court has an established historical record of protecting Americans' right to free speech, and we expect that they will do just that on this important constitutional issue," end quote. So they feel pretty confident that the court will not only hear this case, but rule in their favor. But I guess those are two different questions. Will the court take this case? I think so, yes. And I have a quote here from Carl Tobias, who's a law professor at the University of Richmond, saying, quote, "They still have another shot with the Supreme Court. It's an important issue. It's a difficult one, and it affects a lot of Americans' foreign policy and national security. If it's a matter of the Supreme Court's interest in it, I expect that interest would be high," end quote. So this has it has so many different angles to it. This is definitely something that the court would at least be interested in hearing more about. But then the question would be, okay, even if they hear the case, will they rule any differently than the lower court did? And I got a quote here from TD analyst, Gallant is his last name, saying, he notes that this lower circuit ruling has a similar political composition of the larger ultimate Supreme Court, the Supreme Court, right? A similar number of conservatives and liberals, so it's not like it has a completely different makeup that could kind of sway it in a different direction. It's basically the same kind of court. And I have a quote here from Anupam Chander, professor of law and technology at Georgetown University, saying, quote, "The Supreme Court, not wanting to see this app go dark on January 19th, will freeze the law, and then this gets handed over to the Trump administration and a Trump Department of Justice to figure out what they want to do." So there's still so much up in the air about this, and so much that could change. But there is a good chance this app is indeed banned in the United States. What is that going to mean for media? and social media. I'm not sure, because I think everyone's just going to flock to the competitors like Reels, like YouTube Shorts, but something will be lost. That secret sauce, that algorithm, which is proprietary knowledge, it's a secret, and it's not as simple as just having an algorithm. It's this very specific mathematical formula that gives me like the best content tailored to me. Okay, let me grab a quick drink here. Let me plug my laptop in. We don't want to go dark during the show. Okay, let's talk about story number 2. So James Cameron, it has been announced, he's partnering with Meta, of course, the artist formerly known as Facebook, to bring more premium content to the Meta Quest mixed reality headsets. This is Facebook's VR headsets. I think Oculus was like the original company, and then they bought it. And now it's just Meta Quest instead of Oculus Quest or whatever. So this is going to be a partnership with Cameron's company Lightstorm Vision, and they're going to help Meta to, quote, scale the creation of world-class 3D entertainment experiences spanning live sports and concerts, feature films, and TV series featuring big-name IP on Meta Quest, end quote. Notably, it's unclear what IP this statement is referring to. Does that mean that they're going to be bringing in previously established properties and franchises, or that they're confident in that the content they make will become big name IP? Probably the former, but again, unclear what that's going to actually be. And Cameron put out a quote upon this being officially announced, saying, quote, fantastic news, announcing a comprehensive multi-year partnership with Meta to revolutionize all visual media. Recently, Boz, which is referring to Meta CTO Andrew Bosworth, recently Boz showed me some of Meta's advanced tech. I was amazed by its transformational potential and power, and what it means for content creators globally. I'm convinced we're at a true historic inflection point. Navigating that future with Meta will ensure all of us have the tools to create, experience, and enjoy new and mind-blowing forms of media. Similarly, end quote. Meta also put out a quote saying, quote, in addition to co-producing original content, we'll leverage Lightstorm Vision's cutting-edge technology and production techniques to revolutionize the creation of stereoscopic media. Our goal is to make top-tier 3D content more accessible, both for creators to produce and for people to enjoy at home and on the go, end quote. So it seems like the big push here is the 3D element, which is surprising, right? I didn't know that VR did 3D. Like, obviously VR, the whole point is that it feels like you're there, but that's very different than like having a screen in the headset versus a 3D screen, right? But this whole situation really just brings to light how we're still having these conversations of being on the cusp of the virtual reality explosion, right? Because this is something that I feel like I've been hearing about for a decade. Obviously virtual reality is something that people have been talking about for decades, plural. But it really started to take hold, I feel like, in the mid 2010s, with dedicated headsets, and even something as simple as Google Cardboard, where it's basically like $10 with some lenses. You set it up, you use your phone as the screen, and it works kind of like it's a very good DIY kind of thing. But it's really struggled over that last decade. It hasn't really made a lot of advancements, and if anything, it's regressed. Again, it's an incredibly exciting technology. It's unlike any other experience. If you've never done it, and frankly, I've never done like a really high-end version. I've only ever done like a Google Cardboard thing. But even that shitty DIY thing with your phone and some like pack-in glass lenses, it was still very incredible. It was still very immersive. I'm sure 50 years from now, the stuff I saw is going to feel like when you watch like these old movies, quote unquote, from like 1890, it's just like someone like turning around, because the whole idea at the start was the novelty of it. So a lot of the stuff I saw, it was just about the novelty. So there's just nothing like it. But that comes at a cost, right? When there's nothing like it, that usually means it's harder to produce. So oftentimes these dedicated VR headsets, or mixed reality, if you will, because a lot of times these are not just like you put them on. Like, let's say it's off. And if you have it on your face, I would imagine, it's not like it's completely black. Like, they also kind of function as like glasses, right? Not all of them, but some of them are. Those are what we would call mixed reality headsets. But the problem is that they're prohibitively expensive. So looking at kind of like the top kind of offerings, of course, there's probably dozens more, but like the big ones I feel like are the VR headset from Valve, right? The video game company with Steam. That headset's about $1,000, right? And just put this into context, like a PS5 retail is like $500. Let alone buying it used on eBay for like $400 or something, right? So Valve's VR headset is about $1,000. The Meta Quest is about $500. The PlayStation VR 2, so it's like a sequel or successor to the original PSVR, that's about $550. But all of those combined is still less than the new Apple Vision Pro at $3,500. That's insane. That's something, if you really don't, if you don't want your technology to be adopted by the general masses, congratulations. That is, you were very successful in that, because even the cheapest one, like, no one has money to blow $500. Again, like, why would I spend $500 on the Meta Quest when I can spend $500 on getting a PS5 or an Xbox Series X? Or food or rent or like just any other expense. Because at least with a game console, you have like a huge library of games. Whereas a big issue with a lot of these is that there's not a lot of software to justify the investment in the hardware, right? And it kind of becomes this chicken and egg situation that I feel like the industry just can't break out of. In order to justify investing in more and high quality content for VR, you need a bigger user base to make it worth it financially. But in order to get people to buy into this technology, you need lots of high quality content. So it's ultimately it becomes this, cyclical thing of both sides waiting for the other person to make the move. So I think the only way that virtual reality and mixed reality is going to become more widespread is one side of that equation is going to have to kind of bite the bullet and take the risk. Most likely that's going to, especially in the economy that we're in, that most likely means that companies are going to have to take the plunge and make more content for VR, make better content for VR, even on the chance that it doesn't end up panning out. I think if anyone's in the position to take a risk, it's going to be these companies. And I think that's why James Cameron is such a perfect choice to do this, to kind of bring in the situation. Because he's always, looking at his filmmaking career, he's always been on the forefront of technology, right? I did a story on this channel a couple weeks, or maybe a couple months ago at this point. He recently partnered with an AI company, a video generate text to video company. And he's the exact kind of person who'd be willing, and not only willing, but excited to take a creative risk on this new platform, right? Or this new way of experiencing cinema. It's not quite a different medium. I've actually thought a lot about this. It's not a different medium because it essentially functions the same way the rest of cinema, the cinematic medium functions. It's just that the aspect ratio has been expanded to essentially be this kind of three-dimensional kind of, just all-encompassing aspect ratio. The aspect ratio almost doesn't exist because there is no end to it. But it still functions like a regular movie. But I think this new way of experiencing the cinematic medium, I think he's super, super interested in. And again, kind of tying this back to what I was saying before, this could also be killing two birds with one stone, because it seems like the big focus here is maybe working on 3D stuff, which of course Cameron has experience with. He is the one who kind of he's arguably responsible for making 3D a viable entertainment experience again, with Avatar back in 2009. And that caused a huge boom in so many 3D movies being released, and most of them were not 3D movies, but they were kind of converted to be 3D just to capitalize on the trend, and then they didn't look very good. And part of the trend was 3D TVs that, you could have in your home, and you have special glasses, right? And those came and went. And that ended up kind of being a fad. But could mixed reality headsets be the way for this market to grow? You kind of have this technology that doesn't exist for 3D, but can also do 3D. That might be worth it for people. Because at the same time 3D TVs are coming on the market, you also have the dawn of like the super, super cheap smart TVs. 2D smart TVs. So I think that made sense that people, would rather just get like 4 or 5 TVs so they can have one like across their whole house in the living room and maybe the kitchen, a small one in the kitchen, and then the kid's bedroom, rather than spending all their money on one really powerful and expensive and nice, but expensive 3D TV. So maybe this could be the way that 3D becomes a little more mainstream, at least in terms of the home viewing experience. But I think until they get the price down to something a little more manageable, I think it's just going to be a novelty tech showcase and not something that's actually meaningful for people in their lives. Okay, let me grab a quick drink here. Okay. Let's talk about story number 3. HBO is eyeing actor Papa Asediu, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, for the role of Severus Snape in their upcoming Harry Potter television series. The Hollywood Reporter notes, I think this was an exclusive from the Hollywood Reporter actually, they note that, the sources that they talk to says the role has been offered to Asediu, but, this is still only rumored. There's no official casting has been announced for this. And HBO, when they were asked about this rumor, they said, quote, "We appreciate that such a high-profile series will draw a lot of rumor and speculation. As we make our way through pre-production, we will only confirm details as we finalize deals," end quote. So they're keeping very tight-lipped about this, and they're kind of just like, well, because this is the hottest project in town, it makes sense everyone's talking about it. So, of course, this is all related to the Harry Potter TV series that HBO is developing. As you can see in this picture, this original picture up above my head here, this original picture that was released shows that it's a Max original, right? I believe since this picture was created and they first announced the show, it has been moved from Max to just like HBO proper, which means it will be on Max, but it's not it's going to air on TV the way Succession did, right? Of course, this is the adaptation of the iconic children's fantasy novels by J.K. Rowling, who is an awful person, but we'll get there. And the series included 7 books released from 1997 to 2007. And on top of the book series, there was an equally iconic film series adaptation, right, which had 8 films from 2001 to 2011. And now they are rebooting the material. Now in the form of a television series. This way they can bring the story of Harry Potter to a new generation. And also this is a chance to make it a little more diverse, right? And you see that with this potential casting here of Papa Asediu. If you don't know him, he's a British actor from London. He has a lot of stage and screen experience. His big breakout role was in another HBO show, the HBO miniseries I May Destroy You by Michaela Cole. And he was phenomenal in that. But he's not a mainstream person. A lot of people probably don't know him by name or haven't even seen, like, they don't even recognize him just visually. So this would be a huge level up for his career to play Severus Snape. Of course, this is the role originated by Alan Rickman in the film series to a lot of acclaim. He's the intimidating and mysterious professor at Hogwarts who eventually kind of has a redemption. And he's an extremely popular character in the fandom, right? So this is like a big deal that this kind of unknown is the wrong word, but again, he's not a super mainstream actor. The fact that he's potentially leveling up into this and he's a black actor to boot is really exciting. Though with the caveat, because, diverse casting is really great. I generally have no problem with it. But I do think there are 2 issues. But not because I'm against, race-bending characters. Again, I really do not care about that, and plenty of instances have worked out where it's been a really great decision. But I find this not this specific thing troubling, but the trend in general. Because I believe black actors deserve to have their own iconic roles instead of just getting kind of like what I call like the sloppy seconds. Like they deserve to be able to originate iconic characters. But it seems like the only way that they get to be in big movies is by playing original characters that were originally white, right? And then the other potential concern is we've been down this road before. Studios do not care about diversity. They care about money. The only reason why they are making this more diverse is because they think they can make money off of it, or at the very least, they don't think they'll lose money because of it. And what happens when that's hastily done, it leaves a lot of racist fans angry and disgruntled. You know, I don't care that they're angry and disgruntled. They're racist. I don't care. But then the studios do very little, if anything, to protect their black cast. This is something that, someone like John Boyega has talked about a lot with Star Wars, because the amount of hate that he got for the audacity of being a black main character in Star Wars is just awful. And it's not like Disney did a lot to really protect him. I don't know exactly what, to be fair, to play devil's advocate, I'm not sure like what they would do. But in any case, they definitely didn't really step in any real way. So those are my concerns. I think this is a great choice. I think that's really exciting. I think there is a concern that Papa here, he's a little too attractive, right? Like, I don't know, maybe this is weird. Like, not to throw shade at Alan Rickman, but I feel like what makes Snape work is that he's kind of like a weird, like, you don't thirst over him just off of looks. You thirst because like the whole package of Snape, right? Is Papa Assidio too sexy to play Snape? That should be like the clickbait thumbnail for this video. Is he too sexy? But I guess overall here, I think this is a great choice if this ends up being the move that they go with. But I just have like a broader or like a larger problem with this show in general. Like, should this show even be happening? Harry Potter's legacy is now very complicated, mostly almost exclusively because of J.K. Rowling, who is a proud, virulent transphobe. And it's gotten to the point where it's like, I can't even conceive of watching Harry Potter. Like, I almost feel like I have to wait until she's dead. Even if I'm not streaming it, like, she's not getting any royalties, like, I'm just pulling out, like, my Blu-ray of it. Like, it just feels icky, right? So that's a issue. And that proved to be an issue, at least a little bit with the video game Hogwarts Legacy. A lot of people were boycotting that because ultimately, even if J.K. Rowling's not working on it, she's getting those royalties for the use of the property, right? But then another issue with this is that it's super risky, right? Because you have to cast a bunch of young actors who you're going to need them to do this for 7 seasons. And of course, there's been plenty of TV shows that had child actors that did 7 or if not more seasons. But that was always a year-by-year basis. They could have written the character out. This is like the main characters need to be these young actors who might get better or they might get worse as actors. And you're buying in for 7 seasons. Minimum. Unless they try, and I wouldn't even be surprised if they try to break it up, one of the longer books into 2 seasons so they can maximize as much as possible, right? The fact that the original films and that child cast ended up working out as well as they did is nothing short of a miracle. So it's like, is it really like, can lightning really strike twice where you're going to cast 3 pretty well-adjusted, level-headed kids who also ended up becoming like really fantastic actors in their own right? That seems like a big risk, just logistically. And then another issue here is just like, we already have the films. What does this bring? What new does this bring to the table? The only thing would be, the diverse casting, which is a big blind spot of the original films. And I guess, again, like maybe expanding the storyline or the very least being able to do stuff that the films had to omit because the films had to, be shorter. But I think I have the solution that solves almost all these problems except for the J.K. Rowling part. Because, of course, she's still alive. I think this should just be animated, right? You could have voice actors. You could cast people who are adults who could play the kids, or at least cast older kids, like maybe 16 or 17. And that would be new because it would be a new, fresh presentation of this story that we have not gotten. And it would be a really great opportunity to showcase some really great animation. But of course that would never happen because in the United States, animation is for children, supposedly. So they've decided that it has to be live action. But again, it just feels like at this point we're just doing it because you want to get as much money off of this property as possible. But it feels like the original films, the 8 films, are kind of perfect. Like, not all of the movies are perfect, but just as a franchise, if you don't count the Fantastic Beasts, like, it's just really solid. Like, the worst movie is still, like, decent, right? So I just feel like you're just asking for trouble. But that's like the history of Hollywood studios, that they don't care if they're asking for trouble. They'll just do it. And if it doesn't work out, they'll walk away with a huge severance package and they'll be fine. Okay, let me grab a quick drink here. Okay. Actually, let me get a little bit more. I've been talking a lot. Okay. Let's talk about story number 4. So this is kind of a different story to what I usually do. This is a little more tabloidy, a little more kind of like something you would see on the magazine cover at the supermarket when you're waiting in line, right? Celebrity gossip, right? And normally I wouldn't do a story like this, but it was a slow news week, so I was like, I gotta do something. But then also, there's some stuff here that I think I could turn this into something a little bit more nutritious than like a celebrity gossip, and kind of maybe look at celebrity culture on the whole. So, the story is Barry Keoghan has deactivated his Instagram account due to harassment that he's been receiving following his breakup with pop sensation Sabrina Carpenter. He even accused people of showing up outside of his house and his family's house, harassing them or just like trespassing, which is not okay. And I have this large excerpt from like this post, this statement he put on Twitter. And it's long, but it's still abbreviated. Like, I didn't include everything, but I just like to read this just to give you a sense of where Barry is coming from here. He said, quote, "I can only sit and take so much. My name has been dragged across the internet in ways I usually don't respond to. I have to respond now because it's getting to a place where there are too many lines being crossed. I deactivated my account because I can no longer let this stuff distract from my family and my work. The messages I have received, no person should ever have to read them. Absolute lies, hatred, disgusting commentary about my appearance, character, how I am as a parent, and every other inhumane thing you can imagine. Talking about how I was a heroin baby and how I grew up and dragging my dear mother into it also. Each and every day I work harder to push myself on every level to be the healthiest and strongest person for that boy." He's talking about his son. He has a small son. "I want to provide opportunities for him to learn, fail, and grow. I want him to be able to look up to his daddy, to have full trust in me, and know I will have his back no matter what. I need you to remember he has to read all of this about his father when he is older. Please be respectful to all," end quote. So that's a lot. And so he's really laying it bare for us to read. So let's take a little step back here. So Barry Keoghan, Sabrina Carpenter, let's do a little background on these guys. Let's do a little profile. So Barry Keoghan, he's a 32-year-old actor from Ireland. He kind of had a tough upbringing. His mother struggled with drug addiction and she died when he was 12. And he spent 7 years in 13 different foster homes, just jumping around. Eventually he ended up with his grandmother. And he began acting in 2011. His real big breakout roles were in Dunkirk and The Killing of a Sacred Deer in 2017. And then kind of showed up in a bunch of stuff here and there. Really blew up this past fall, like a year ago, roughly, when he was in the 2023 film Saltburn, right? Which was kind of a polarizing film, but it was very zeitgeisty, right? It felt very, was all over TikTok and memes about it. And that's kind of his fixture. So he's considered like one of the best actors of his generation. And he kind of came out of nowhere, especially from this kind of troubled upbringing. It's a huge contrast to Sabrina Carpenter, right? So she's 25 years old. She's so 32 versus 25. She's a singer, an actress, and songwriter from Pennsylvania originally. Notably, she's the niece of Nancy Cartwright, who's a voice actress and most famous for voicing Bart Simpson since like the very beginning. Her father built her a recording studio presumably at their house to foster her music passion. So again, you can really see a difference in their upbringings, right? Not to throw shade at Sabrina Carpenter, right? It's not her fault that she had a loving family, situation or, this, that, and the other. But you can really see the difference, right? She ended up becoming a Disney Channel star in the 2010s. I think like her first big role was on Girl Meets World. And, as every Disney Channel star does, she released music for like about a decade. Never really got any traction. I mean, I had no idea she existed until Olivia Rodrigo really came into the spotlight musically, because Driver's License and a lot of her songs were all about what was his name, the boy from High School Musical, the series that she was with, and then they broke up and he went with Sabrina Carpenter, right? So I only knew Sabrina Carpenter as the other woman, right? But that all really changed over the past couple of years. But really this year, she just exploded with just several hits, like huge songs of the summer. But I say of the summer, but I work in an office where we have like the radio on in the background. I hear her at least once a day, every day, and it's December, right? Songs like Espresso, Please, 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 Taste, right? These are huge hits of 2024. Not only financially successful, but just very popular, right? So she's really this huge figure in the industry, so it makes sense that people would be very interested in any relationship that she's in. So, the two of them, Barry and Sabrina, normally I refer to people by their last names, but this feels more personal, so we're going to call them by their first name. So, they began dating back in December of 2023. They ended up moving in together this past May, and they got like a $4.5 million house in Hollywood Hills, which feels like a big commitment, but I guess if you're rich, that might just be like moving into like a small apartment together. I don't know. And he even starred in her music video for Please, 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 which is all about, pleading to the one that she loves, that she's with, to not embarrass her and not, do anything to make her cry. And he's in the music video as kind of like the bad boy that she meets in prison. I forget the reason why she's in prison in the story of the music video, but she meets him in prison, and he was in it. And he was also a very memey kind of event that took place. But of course, nothing lasts forever, and it was announced, as if the Pope is dying, that the two of them have broken up earlier this month. It seems like they were kind of on and off for a while anyway by this point. And rumors have been circulating that it was because of infidelity. He had cheated on Sabrina with Becky Hill, who I had never heard of. It turns out she's an OnlyFans model, a very, very pretty young woman. And I guess my understanding is she initially kind of stoked the rumor. She never said oh yeah, this happened, but would share stuff of people talking about it. But then she backed off, probably because Barry was like, please stop, because I'm getting all this harassment. And she came out and said, quote, I have never even encountered this man in my life. The only time I've seen him is on my TV screen from watching Saltburn. I'm sorry, but if I really was the one getting with Barry, why in the world would I be reposting about it? Coming from someone who has been cheated on, I would never want to home wreck any relationship or put any girl through that pain ever, end quote. And it seems pretty sincere, but who the hell knows? She might just be covering. I don't really care about about the cheating or infidelity. The main point of the story is no one deserves to be harassed, right? And it's this weird thing where we don't think of celebrities as people. Now, I'm not, I'm a super far left progressive guy. So I'm all about speaking truth to power. I don't care about civility politics. If a elected official or someone in the government is doing awful things, they deserve to be harassed and getting, not harassed like death threats, but getting, people protesting outside their house. You deserve that, kind of. Deserves the wrong word, but this is a whole different situation. And cheating is awful. I think it's one of the worst things that people can do that's not illegal, right? but I'm not sure what saying awful things to him about his appearance or the way he is a father to his son. I don't know what that actually accomplishes, right? You certainly shouldn't show up at his house. But again, we don't think of these people as people because we see them on the screen, whether it's the big screen or our TV or on our phone or a laptop. There's a cognitive dissonance there where we separate ourselves from them, but we forget that they are just like us. Their lives are very different than ours, especially if they're very wealthy, but they're still human beings. They still participate in this whole human being thing, right? So the reason why I'm talking about this story is celebrity relationships are really weird, right? Because again, they're still human beings. But, like, this is not that ridiculous of a situation. Two people started dating, and then after maybe a year, just didn't really work out, and it seems like they've gone their separate ways. But when you're a celebrity, especially both of you are celebrities, every move you make is under a microscope, right? Every single thing that you do, every breath you take, whatever the song, right? Everything you do is going to be scrutinized by everybody. And again, it raises these questions. Why do we care about this? And I don't have an answer. Why do we care? And I'm not throwing up my hands going like, oh, everyone's so superficial. That's all I'm saying. I care. Well, why? If they put it on the news, John and Lorraine from Indianapolis are having trouble in their marriage, no one would give a shit, right? So why do we care about this? And again, I think it's because we've developed these parasocial relationships with these people. Because they're part of our lives in ways that John and Lorraine from Indianapolis are not, right? So I'm doing this tabloidy story, but I'm trying to find a way to make it a little more insightful. I think that's my insight, is that, I'm sure it's not a new insight, but it is strange that we care about this kind of stuff at all. And I think up to a certain point, when it comes to something like this, we should respect people's privacy. Okay, let me grab a quick drink. Okay, let's talk about story number 5. So, award season has officially begun as several organizations have announced their nominations or even winners, depending on the type of award. So, award season, if you don't know, this is the lead up to the Academy Awards. This is the period of the film industry's calendar year where we're all thinking about who's going to go home with the gold, right? These nominations and winners of these other organizations, they're not always the perfect predictor of who's going to be nominated or win at the Oscars, but it at least shows where the trends are moving, right? If you have a movie that is not winning or nominated for anything from any other publication, it'll be rare that it gets nominated for the Oscars. And if it is, very rare that it's going to win, right? So at least it shows you general trends. And this is also, the award season is important for the box office because when something gets nominated, especially for bigger awards like the Golden Globes, the Academy Awards, people are like, oh, I want to go see the movies. I want to go see all the nominees. So oftentimes that's why so many movies open in the fall. A, so it's fresh in mind for awards voters. But then also B, it can kind of extend out its release. So once the nominations are announced, it can kind of get a little boost in attendance. So we had this past week a bunch of groups put out their nominations and winners. I kind of like to go through them kind of quickly, just to kind of look at kind of where the trends are, and then we'll talk about like the big one that was announced early this week. Maybe that could have been its own video, but I wanted to do these other ones as well. So we have the Gotham Awards, right, which is like an independent film focused organization, and they put out their nominees for Best Feature, which included Anora, Baby Girl, Challengers, A Different Man, and Nickel Boys, with A Different Man being the winner. I guess they put out the nominations and the winner on the same day, right? In terms of multiple nominations, Anora had 4. I Saw the TV Glow, which wasn't nominated for Best Feature, but that had 3, and then Nickel Boys had 3. So you see Anora up there at the top. We also, looking at independent film, you have the Independent Spirit Awards, which is like a little bit more prestigious. It's kind of, they really are like the Oscars of indie film. And their nominees for Best Feature, which they have not announced the winners for, that's going to be closer to like in the early part of 2025. Their nominees for Best Feature include Anora, I Saw the TV Glow, Nickel Boys, Sing Sing, and The Substance. And in terms of multiple nominations, Anora had 5, I Saw the TV Glow also had 5, and Dee Dee, which was not part of the best feature list, got 4. So we're seeing a little bit of a trend here. Anora has the most nominations at both of the things we've looked at so far. And then you have the National Board of Review. So the way they do is that they'll release a bunch of different categories. They usually they don't release the nominees. They just release like the one winner. So like Best Actor is blank, Best Director is blank. But the exception is they'll do the top 10 films of the year. And the top 10 films include Anora, Baby Girl, A Complete Unknown, which is like the Bob Dylan biopic with Timothée Chalamet, Conclave, Furiosa, a Mad Max saga, Gladiator 2, Juror Number 2, which is not a sequel to Juror Number 1. I think it's just the character is Juror Number 2. Queer, A Real Pain, Sing Sing, and then the movie that won out of those top 10 for best movie of the year, Wicked. That's really interesting. I think the movie is one of the best movies of the year. I'm really disappointed now that we're moving into the awards that do honor all movies, not just indie films. A little sad to see Dune Part 2 not being here, because that might be the best movie of the year. But Wicked's a close second, so I'm not super upset about this. But again, that was a big surprise for a lot of people. If nothing else, just because the other nominations that we've been seeing were all for indie, so Wicked wouldn't have even been in the contention. Similarly, the AFI Awards, they do, they put out their top 10 films, which is a pretty similar list. You got Anora, The Brutalist, A Complete Unknown, Conclave, Dune Part 2, thank you, Amelia Perez, Nickel Boys, A Real Pain, Sing Sing, and then, of course, Wicked. Los Angeles Film Critics Association put out their award for Best Film, among others. Best Film was Anora. So Anora's been represented here like every single time. But then we get to the big boy, or the medium boy, because the big boy is the Oscars. But when we get to the medium boy, the Golden Globes was announced. So, of course, I'm only focusing on all of this. I'm really just looking at the nominations for Best Picture. And some of these awards organizations, they also do TV. I'm just, for the sake of simplicity, I'm just focusing on the movies. What's weird about the Golden Globes is that they split up their movie, their film awards by drama and then musical or comedy. And the musical or comedy category has always been like a punching bag, because why are they separated? Because what if you have like a weird fusion with like a dramedy? And why is one category composing of both musicals and comedies? And oftentimes, movies that are really neither musicals nor comedies end up in this category. So it's always kind of a punching bag. But just for the sake of being thorough, we'll look here. So in terms of the Best Motion Picture Awards, for the drama category, we have The Brutalist, A Complete Unknown, Conclave, Dune Part 2, Nickel Boys, and September 5th. Which is like a movie about like the Munich Israeli hostage crisis in the 70s at the Olympics. Steven Spielberg did a whole movie about it called Munich. And then the musical or comedy category, we have Anora, Challengers. Is Challengers a comedy? Like, there's funny parts. I don't know. Amelia Perez, which is a musical. A Real Pain. The Substance, which is not a comedy. It's like maybe a dark, twisted comedy, but I wouldn't really say it's funny. There's parts that are funny. And then, of course, Wicked. I'm gonna probably bet Wicked's gonna win Best Musical or Comedy, and then drama is gonna be Dune Part 2, maybe. But if we look at multiple nominations, the big surprise here is for the movie Amelia Perez. So this is a Netflix musical that has been on my radar, but I haven't had a chance to watch it. It's based off of a opera libretto. So it's already based off of a stage musical, essentially, which itself is based off of a 2018 novel. And let me pull up Letterboxd so we can read the Letterboxd blurb, so you can get a sense of like what this movie is even about. But Letterboxd actually isn't opening, so let me just look at Wikipedia here. So the film stars Zoe Saldana, and then it lists other people I'm not gonna read. It is about a feared cartel leader who enlists a lawyer to help her disappear and achieve her dream of transitioning into a woman. Interesting. That actually sounds like a really interesting premise. It's not got particularly good reviews, though, which is why I've kind of stayed away. But this got 10 nominations at the Golden Globes. And this is a record for most nominations for a film that would be in the musical or comedy category. I think the movie that holds the ultimate record is in the... I forget what it was, but it's in the drama category. So Emilia Perez has 10. The Brutalist has 7. And Conclave has 6. So Wicked or Anora are not in that top multiple nominations list. But as we've seen plenty of times at the Golden Globes and at the Oscars especially, you have sometimes you have movies that get a lot of nominations and not a lot of wins. For example, I think it was Killers of the Flower Moon last year. The Oscars had like 8 or 9 nominations and walked away with 0 wins. So, so it remains to be seen, how many of those 10 nominations Emilia Perez will win. But it seems like looking at all of these different awards, my gut, what I can say for sure, the front runners heading into the Oscars, and these aren't necessarily the people who I think are going to win the Best Picture award, but these are ones where, I will put all the money I have on that these will be nominated at least for Best Picture. Anora, Wicked, and then to a smaller extent, Emilia Perez. I don't think you have someone like Emilia Perez get that many nominations and then get shut out from the Academy Awards, right? Because a lot of the people are similar. It's similar kind of way they look at movies. So, Anora is really great. In some ways, Anora is probably a better movie than Wicked, but Wicked just appeals to me very specifically. My big bet is on Wicked. If I had to say what movie is going to win Best Picture at the Academy Awards, I'm going to say Wicked. Unless, and this is a big unless there's a big backlash, right? That people kind of get sick of it when something is super popular, then a couple weeks or months later, everyone decides, well, I actually have never liked it, right? Unless there's some kind of backlash like that. It's super popular with both critics and audiences. And that's really key. And notably, the past couple of years of the Oscars have been very mainstream. And even if you go pre-COVID, I mean, if you go to looking at like Green Book, or Parasite, Everything Everywhere All at Once, Coda, Oppenheimer, like these are movies that maybe not so much Parasite, but especially Everything Everywhere All at Once, and then especially Oppenheimer. These were movies that were what's the right word? It was seen by a lot of people, and a lot of people really, really liked it. Wicked kind of feels similar. And if Moonlight winning in 2017 felt like a reaction to the election of Donald Trump, I feel like Wicked is another reaction, right? That awarding Wicked, because it feels like the perfect rebuke to MAGA. Right? Not in any specifics, but just kind of like a counterpoint of kind of a cultural vision for the United States. So my big bet's going to be on Wicked. I would not be upset if Anora won, but I just feel like a movie about a very explicit movie about a sex worker that's not like a a very pessimistic critique of capitalism and worker exploitation. I just feel like that's not going to win Best Picture. I would like it. That would be pretty interesting. But not only would I prefer Wicked over Anora, just because, again, it appeals to me specifically, I think it just has a lot more going for it in terms of awards chances. Okay, so that wraps up the show. Just want to give a few quick plugs. This isn't my only YouTube channel. I also have a sister channel called Peter Squared, where I cover topics related to film, media, entertainment in a more structured video essay format. The video I have up now is called A Closer Look at Frozen, where, you guessed it, I take a closer look at the Disney film Frozen, taking a look at what went right, what went wrong, and everything in between, using these cartoon versions of like an older, younger version of myself. It would really mean a lot to me to go check that out. You can find the link to that down in the description below. Also want to give a quick plug to the podcast I do with my fiance Viviana called Now That's What I Call a Franchise, where we pick a film franchise and we go through every single installment. The good, the bad, and the ugly. This season we're doing Star Wars, which has just been so much fun. This upcoming Friday we're releasing our episode on the Obi-Wan Kenobi miniseries, which you might be saying, that's not a movie, and to which I say, yes it is, just broken up and really long. That's going to be a lot of fun, so definitely go check that out. You can find us wherever you get your podcast. You can also find us on YouTube if that's your preferred way to podcast. You can also just find us at the link down in the description below. And then want to finally, once again, give a plug to Cinnamon Q. So it's not just a YouTube channel. It started as and still is a Substack newsletter where I publish written reviews for new movies coming out. The most recent review I have up is Wicked. Really mean a lot to me for you to go check that out. I've been doing this for almost 3 years now. I have over like 100 reviews. You can find the link to that in the description down below, or you can just go to your browser and type in cinnamonqso.substack.com. That's it for this week. Thank you all so much for watching. If you haven't yet, please like this live stream. It really, really, really helps with engagement and the algorithm so other people can find this channel. So if you've stumbled upon this channel, why not subscribe? Why not just stick around a while? We're trying to grow the community. But until next time, peace out.